Cam, and welcome back to my road to Deadpool and Wolverine. With Deadpool and Wolverine coming out this weekend, I'm speedrunning through the last of the Fox X-Men films in honor of Deadpool and Wolverine. I've only got a few more left, so let's get into this one, which is among my personal favorites. I have loved it since I first saw it in the theaters, and it is what should have been the ending to one of the best characters in comic book movie history, but, well, as we will see at the end of this weekend, that was that was not entirely accurate. We're talking about Logan. This was directed by James Mangold, released in 2017, and I am joined once again by Phil from Phil Talk Sports, who joined me to talk about the Wolverine. Phil, thank you for joining me.
No problem, man. Great to be back. I'm looking forward to Deadpool and Wolverine as you are, but I'm really happy to talk about this one first because as far as just the hype for a movie and just the experience of watching a movie in the theaters, this is like a top five one for me that I was super looking forward to. I broke out the Blu-ray and a drawing I got at MegaCon a couple years ago in the background for the occasion because I love this movie and I rewatched it today actually throughout the day to catch up and remind myself about the little things in it. And it was great to revisit because it's been a couple years. This isn't a movie that I think you can watch over and over again in that sense, but every couple of years it's going to hit just right. So I probably haven't seen it in a few years. It was the perfect time to rewatch it. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
I think I should hammer home first and foremost that this is not a happy movie. This is a very dark, sad, as close to a reality-based X-Men movie as we will probably ever get. The movie takes place in the near future. Actually, let me pull the year because I did
I believe
find
it's
it online.
29, if I'm not mistaken. 2029, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct. It is 2029. Basically everything has gone straight south, like straight downward spiral. There are almost no mutants left through an accident that is never fully explained, though our minds can kind of put two and two together as to what happened. Logan, Cat, Logan, Professor X are really the only two powerful mutants left. There are some scattered ones around and ones coming up, but really we are living in the end times for mutant kind. And throughout the movie, it's basically Logan taking care of Professor X, taking odd jobs here and there because that's all he can take, he being Logan, because Logan is dying. The Adamantium is finally catching up to him after decades and pretty much centuries at this point of being inside of his
Yeah.
body. Like he has his body has cashed so many checks, and now the man is coming around taking names, and his name is Next. But he's got one mission left, is to escort a young girl named X-23, played by Daphne Keene, to a mysterious settlement known simply as Eden. So Phil, I remember watching the trailer for this when the trailer first dropped. It's one of my favorite teaser trailers of all time. It's soundtracked by Hurt by Johnny Cash, one of my favorite songs of all time, period. They got the assignment. Full stop. From the very first trailer, they understood. They knew what they were doing.
I remember going to see this and I was with a couple of friends and we go to sit down and my friend jokingly goes, "This is like Wolverine's finest hour. So if he's not just killing people left and right in the first 10 minutes, I'm walking out of here." Being, kidding, of course. But little did he know that's exactly what he was going to get. And that opening scene with he's drunk in the or hungover in the limo. We still don't know how Wolverine can be hungover. Makes a little more sense now because, as you explained, his powers are wearing off. Someone's trying to steal the tires off his limo, extended car, whatever you want to call it. And he fights them off with relative ease, but you can tell it takes more out of him than normally does. And that iconic shot of him like trying to retract the claws and they slowly come out. He's got to like will them out of his knuckles is really it sets the tone for what Logan you're going to see in this movie and how like it's the guy but you've never seen him like this before.
It's as close to an Old Man Logan comic book movie as we will probably ever get. You'll never be able to do a proper Old Man Logan comic because among the villains in that movie are the kids of the Fantastic Four, who are all mutants and all evil. You got the Hulk's kids who have like a whole thing going on there. You got a blind Hawkeye. There is no way in this or any universe, well, I mean, with Kevin Feige billing this next phase as the Mutant Saga, there might be more on the table than we previously thought. But in 2017, making a proper Old Man Logan movie was next to impossible. So
Right.
essentially, what was made was, like I said, a reality-based X-Men movie taking place in the not so far future, but the far future. And like you touched on, Logan is dying. And like you touched on with the claws scene, there's a scene just after the limo fight in which Wolverine, the skin is retracting the bullets from his body, but it's going super slow. And in like say X-Men Days of Future Past, for example, the bullets were just like and they're out, like in the blink of an eye. But here it's
Right.
like they're taking their time a little bit. Because people forget that Logan is an old man. Like we're talking about like he was born conservatively in the 1850s, 1860s,
Yeah.
and it is now 2029. So this guy has lived centuries of life. As it was said in the first X-Men movie, he might even be older than Professor X himself. And he probably
Right.
is.
I mean, to call him an old man is almost not doing it enough justice. He's like a borderline sentient being at this point. He's, as old as a Sasquatch legend or anything of that to people that have, would have been around him. So like, and I've given this a lot of thought, that opening scene, especially because it's really hard to do it any better. When he retracted those claws, it makes you wonder, like, when's the last time he even did that? He's just been riding around in, doing his driving gigs, laying low, helping Professor X, who's in a state that no one ever thought they'd see him in. So I wonder, like, part of it is he's old, another part is just like, when's the last time you pulled that out? If you have a car in a garage for a whole year, it's not going to start when you first turn the key. So it's very similar to that, in my opinion, of like, there's a big jump in time between the last time we saw him in any iteration and this. So you really wonder, yes, he's not living a glamorous life, but it may have been relatively like violence free for the most part for a while. So like, I'm sure he enjoyed that part. So that's something to think about too.
His entire existence consists of taking care of Professor X, who is 97 years old at the time of this movie, but basically is like they're living in Mexico completely off the land. Professor X is in a state where his mental capacity is so strong that if you trigger him just right, he pretty much can take out like swaths of people with just his mind. And he has
Right.
dementia. One of the darkest scenes in the movie is one that I don't think gets talked about a lot. Is when we first see Professor X. He's rolling around and he's like quoting like commercials from the radio, I want to say, and he's like the
He's
new
quoting a Taco Bell commercial. Yeah.
yeah, the Taco Bell commercial. I was just coming to that, and he's like, the new cheesy gordita crunch from Taco Bell. It's the next best thing. And throughout the entire of the Fox X-Men series, Professor X has been portrayed as very dignified. This is not that. So that was a very
Right.
effective, like showing that this is not the Professor X that you know. Time has not been kind.
I'm glad you brought that up because to me, that's like maybe the most memorable thing in this movie. Like when I first think of this movie, that's one of the first scenes that's going to come up to me because, like you said, this man is known for like his peak intelligence, everything that he's done in the world, and now he's, I would say he's no different than your average senior citizen, but he is in the sense that if you trigger him the wrong way, like you said, he can kill like a town's worth of people, and we have reason to believe that something like that has happened already before.
Exactly. And like I said, an event took place. It's never fully explained. It's explained, I believe, through flashbacks or close to a flashback as you can get in a movie like this. But James Mangold initially pitched this movie as a cross between, or among the influences he brought up were the movie The Wrestler, the Darren Aronofsky one, and Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood movie. And I haven't seen The Wrestler in a minute, but I've seen Unforgiven. I watched it a few years ago, and this definitely feels very much like this is supposed to be the last one for the Hugh Jackman portrayal of Wolverine. And afterwards, there were rumors that Taron Egerton was going to be the next one, or Tom Hardy was going to be considered. But if this was going to be the last one, and we obviously know now it's not, but if it was going to be the last one, this was like just what a way to go out. Starting off as the limo driver and then just taking care of Professor X, like meeting X-23, and then we get that scene, the Berserker scene, which I'm jumping ahead in the timeline a little bit, where he drinks the
Hmm.
fluid and is like, all right, one more round, and he just wrecks shop throughout that forest. Just that rock, the Dwayne the Rock Johnson clip of him doing that, that is that for that scene for that movie for me.
Yeah, I agree. And this, even when it came before it came out, you mentioned the trailer and how they did it right from the get go. It was rated R, which we didn't see at the time for what they just labeled as another superhero movie by the uneducated in the industry. And then it was a modern take on like a western, which I don't know other than your average Clint Eastwood movie that comes out on like CMT. Is like we don't have westerns in the late 2019 19s or the 2020s, so it really just covered a lot of ground that movies weren't covering at the time, and I think it was done perfectly. And you mentioned like this was meant to be the end of the character, at least played by Jackman, and yes, we're getting something with Wolverine and Deadpool coming out soon, which I'm looking forward to that. I think it's still going to be a fun time at the movies, but it's going to be, I'm willing to take a bet on this, and by the time this comes out, maybe everyone's seen the movie and I'm dead wrong, and that's fine. It's going to be as close to non-canon as possible. I think, however they bring him back, whether it's a time hop or it's going to be a really strange technicality, and it's going to be a very isolated adventure with the two of them. So yes, it's something else that exists, but really, when you think of the timeline of the character, this is still the last page. Wherever they shoehorn this in prior to the last page is fine, but this will still be the last page.
It's also important to know that I am aware that in Deadpool and Wolverine, this is a different version of Wolverine. They're doing the
Yeah.
whole multiverse thing, so I'm aware of that. My first gut reaction to it was, please. And when it comes to comic book characters, they come back from death and back to life again like pro wrestlers retire. Like it's always going to be retconned at some point. So I'm aware of
Mm-hmm.
it. I understand that. But with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, it felt special. And when I first heard the announcement, I'm like, it's not really that special anymore. But from what I've seen of it, I've seen of trailers and reviews now, it looks like they're going in a different spin with it, which is like, okay, I'm gonna hear him out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they've done enough good faith, and like I've liked the other two, or what, three Deadpools, however much there's been, or this is three, right? For
Three
Deadpool.
coming up, yes.
Three, yeah. So one was great, two was fun. Like they've built up enough goodwill that I'm not going to dismiss it. And like for I imagine Jackman has enough respect for the role. It's something that he's always spoke highly of doing. He's not one of those actors that not that he didn't have fame before, but we reached a new level of fame playing a superhero character and then dismisses it like it wasn't important to his career. He's not like that. So I don't think he would do anything that truly tarnishes what he's built up in all the X-Men movies, and then in his unofficial trilogy that's still kind of a trilogy. So like he's played him in a total what, like close to 10 movies now, not counting this one. I don't think he's interested in ruining it for a 95-minute adventure that they're going to have.
The Wolverine trilogy is kind of like the Dollars trilogy starring Clint Eastwood. There's no set canon, there's no real through line other than that Clint Eastwood plays some version of the Man of No Name, but here, the Wolverine trilogy, the only through line is that Hugh Jackman always plays Wolverine. So the canon is loose at best. But I
And they
wanted to,
will reference other X-Men, like other events that happened in the X-Men. Like there's enough there to tell you, yes, this is the same guy from the same universe. Those other experiences you've seen him have, he's had in this. So like there, like you said, there's enough. There's not a black and white timeline of it necessarily. There's enough to tell you it's the same guy all the way through, which is all you need. You don't need it. Like what made the Avengers stuff so successful is like how they were able to like pinpoint like everything goes in an order. You don't have to do that every time, and that's what made that special. But I think this is enough, and I think that they could do that moving forward. That like, yeah, it's the same guy. You're not going to see every step along the way. Think like Rick and Morty. They have adventures when you're not watching them, right? But
yeah,
it doesn't prevent you from enjoying the adventures you do see. So I think it's kind of similar with this.
I couldn't have put that better myself. But I wanted to, we can make this a Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart love fest if we want to, but there are more people involved in this one. I wanted to ask what your
Sure.
feelings on Donald Pierce were.
He was interesting. He reminded me of like if someone from Sons of Anarchy ended up with some mutant powers. So I think he was different enough, and he had like like compared to Logan, of course, he's got like a youth to him. He has the cockiness that Logan used to have. So when they stand face to face at times, like he's almost looking at a younger version of himself until a younger version of himself shows up in this movie. So that's a whole other thing. So like I don't know unless you bring back someone like Sabretooth for this, like he needed a new villain anyway. So like I thought he was more than passable in this for sure. That whole character in general.
The last thing Jax Teller needs is mutant powers. But
It's true. We're rewatching Sons right now, actually, funny enough. So that's why it's in my head probably.
that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. Daphne Keene is X-23. She doesn't speak much in the movie, at least at first, but I love the relationship that Logan and her do have throughout. It's very much father-daughter sort of kinda. It's implied
Yeah.
in certain scenes that like it is very much father-daughter, but it's never fully like given a definitive answer from what I could
Mhm.
recall. But I thought Daphne Keene was great. I love how she had the two claws instead of the three, and Professor X pointed out that
Yes.
because she is a female, she has two claws. I'm like, okay, that was a nice little touch there. And then the scene
Sure.
where they get into that fight in the car after Professor X dies, I'll want to put a pin in that. I want to get back to that because that's a brutal scene, but we'll get to that in a
Hmm.
second. When they're
Yeah.
like, I'm going to Eden to see my friends, and Logan's like, we're not going to Eden.
It is a 2-day drive, and I am not taking you. Don't fucking head me!
And then it's such a realistic fight. It's not over the top,
Yeah.
it's not drawn out. It just, you can tell Logan is just so done with all of this, but he remembers that he still has a conscience and wants to help this girl any way that he can. So
Yeah.
he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, and finally just like, fine, we're going. Like he goes under
Yeah.
protest, but he still goes.
Right. The whole like escorting of her for this movie, like if this was done wrong, this would have been that Channing Tatum movie Dog with just Wolverine happens to be the one driving the car. That's if it's done poorly, and it's not here. It's actually done really well. And you're right, they have that real fight. You mentioned Professor X passing away. That two or three scenes strung together, which might be like 10 minutes of the movie, where they're staying with that family on the farm that they have, and they're like pretending that, oh, this is my dad and this is my daughter, and they're obviously just doing it to have a alibi or whatever. But you almost see a couple minutes in, Logan's like enjoying, even if it's pretending, enjoying that family moment that he's probably never really had outside of like a couple short stints in the academy, maybe. Like that's the closest he gets to peace in this movie at all. And then it's quickly abrupted by like the attack on the farm and then the clone coming in and everything. But you're right, just to see him in that like something he never thought he wanted. And for a lot of the movie, he views Professor X as a burden, which at this point he is, but like you still like you're not going to leave him, and he's never going to leave him either. But for a moment, like you're with this professor that you don't want to have to deal with. You're with this kid that you at the time wanted nothing to do with. But there's a rare 10 minutes in this movie that he's incredibly content with both of these people in his life at this dinner table. So that's the closest thing to like peace and harmony you get in this movie, and it's quickly ripped away. So yeah, it's very very touching. You mentioned the fight. Yeah, outside of him like attacking his truck with a shovel, like we've all had those screaming matches on the side of the road with somebody at one point or another. So yeah, very very realistic. In that moment, you forget that they're like superheroes. You just look at it as like a father daughter dynamic, like you said. So like this movie just goes in so many different directions, but it stays on track at the same time.
Absolutely. And shout out to James Mangold for having the idea of doing the scene where Professor X dies at the hands of X-24, which is basically a Wolverine clone. So
Yeah,
Professor X, to his death, like knows that like his final image is seeing Logan over him with the claws just plunging into his chest. And we know that the Logan
it's a
that we
clone,
know would never do something like that. But
right?
Pierce and Transigen, the company that's like doing these mutant things, they're playing dirty pool. And so that's just the game that's being played. It's like that scene, the burial scene where Wolverine tries to give a eulogy and he just can't, and then the fight at the side of the road. Wow, just like hits you right there.
Or when he tries to do the eulogy and X-23 just goes over and like I don't know if she fully holds his hand, but just like puts her hand on him.
Yeah.
And that was an alternate poster of the movie, if I'm not mistaken. It's like them from behind and they're just like holding hands, which is a pretty iconic shot as well. Really, not to jump too far ahead, but like when they eventually get to where I want to call them the New Mutants, but I know that's a whole other thing. But like for the sake of this conversation,
Yeah.
the
We don't talk about the new
right.
in this
So
house.
the next generation of mutants, I guess I'll call them. Like you almost feel like him delivering her to them. It's Olympics right now. Like it almost feels like the person that brings like the lantern to the thing. Like he's gonna, he's not gonna see tomorrow, but he's done everything he can to make sure that this group of kids do see tomorrow. So like it was very much like with the Avengers series where it's like, okay, this core group is you're not going to see them like this anymore. We're trying to hand it off to the next group, which they're still doing that to different levels of success. I wanted to see what this group does next, and we've never really seen that. So it puts a little sour taste on like how this movie ends because like you want it to be worth it. Wrestling talk. You want the payoff for him putting them over of her being so important and them being so important to get them together. And we never really got that payoff. But that's not the movie's fault. That's what they did afterwards. So if you just press pause in your brain as this movie ends, you're like, wow, you really, he did a life changing thing on his last day. So that's something that you can, he's good at what he does, but what he does usually isn't very nice. This was very nice. He was very selfless for a character who isn't always, who's often like, not my problem, not my pig, not my farm. I will be there to like prevent your death, but anything short of that, like not an issue for me. To go out of his way to handle and admit that both these people, back to X as well, like mean a lot to him, regardless of if he would talk about it a lot or not.
Yeah, I think this is as good a place as any to talk about the finale because man, what a way to go out. You got Logan going berserk, taking that serum, going just ham on that entire forest and everyone in there. You got X-23 and X-24 fighting. And something that I did not catch on the Wolverine review, and that is on nobody else but me, is when Morocco tells Wolverine that she has seen his death. And like she said, you'll be holding your heart in your hand. And it wasn't literal by any means, but his heart in that moment was X-23 and was holding
Right.
her in his hand. And so it wasn't true to the letter, but in a way it did become true. And then the final line where he says, "So this is what it feels like," just breaks your
Yeah.
heart, but also is like it's like the ending of the Return of the King where the hobbits and Gandalf go on that boat off to the what I'm gonna call heaven. It has a different
Mhm.
name, but it escapes me at the moment. You don't want to see him leave, but you love to watch him go. As weird as I just put that.
And when he says this is what it feels like, there's almost the semblance of a smile on his face when he says it. In a way, like the slightest smirk is there, and yeah, it's it's saying goodbye to a character. It's like it was handled. It's like imagine if when Iron Man is gone, if the whole movie was about him leading up to that moment. It's like if he had the spotlight for that snap and everything. But um, while we're gonna see him again in a movie, this I said this will always be how you remember the character ending because I think what we're about to see, not to step on the lead here, but like it's gonna be different enough that I don't think it's gonna bother hardcore Wolverine fans or supporters of the series that's already there. So I think we're in good hands, and this is a Mount Rushmore of like letting the rest any character. I don't care if it's superhero or not. Like this is how you do it. You take notes if you want to put the end to a character that has like decade plus in media.
I agree. It's getting an easy, amazing grade from me. I think this represents the very peak of what Fox was able to do with the X-Men, not worrying about continuity or what kind of matched with who. Uh, I would argue that comic book movies reached a peak in 2016 because it's important to keep in mind that in that year alone, we got Batman v Superman, we got Deadpool, we got Suicide Squad, we got Captain America Civil War, we got Doctor Strange, and I'm sure I'm missing another big one. It was a
Hmm.
massive year for comic book movies. It was big in spectacle and in size. And then here comes Logan, which
Yeah.
has big spectacle near the end, but is mostly, like you touched on, sort of a Western almost. A Western with X-Men style mutants and less
Yeah.
six shooters.
I mean, there's a few stick shooters, weirdly enough, but like, yeah, if you replace all the claws and stuff with guns, like, it's just a western. It's the way the wrestler you mentioned, which was kind of pulled, some stuff from this. If that if Mickey Rourke is a firefighter, it's the same movie. You just need to have him in a profession that's dangerous. So like, you twist around a little bit of the details, but as long as the core story is solid, like this one is, it's exactly what you need. I think the only thing we didn't touch on. We touched on it for a second, but glossed over it. When Professor has, they're calling him seizures. I feel like there could have been a better name for him. When he has them in like the hotel or the community lodge or wherever they are, and everyone is kind of frozen, but only Logan can kind of move, and he's like powering through it, and he's slowly killing all the bad guys, which is kind of funny to go back and rewatch. That's one of the that's probably his last like scene at full power, if you want to view it that way, outside of like taking the berserk shot or whatever. So I think to see one last time, like, no, he's even in the eyes of mutants, like he's a step above what he has. No one else has. No one else could have done that, which I think is why you're led to believe a lot of the X-Men died the last time this happened too. That's something that's heavily implied. So the fact that he was able to push through it, kill the bad guys, and save him just puts him like a cut above even other X-Men and other heroes that were probably involved the last time.
I agree. But I pass it off to all of you. What did you think of Logan? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to read what you have to say. Phil, thank you so much for joining me for this. This was a lot of fun. Like you said, I wouldn't watch Logan every day. You would have to like mentally prepare yourself because this
Yeah.
is very sad, very dark. It deals with a lot. Like I wouldn't throw this on in the background to like clean the house or something like that. It's like literally appointment viewing. You have to sit down, you have to cut out all distractions, and you're locked in. Blinders up like a horse at the Kentucky Derby, just straight ahead. But you
Right.
know
Not
what
not something I would call rewatchable at all, but that initial viewing, it's like a top 5 experience for me ever. Like it's one of those movies you wish you could forget you've seen it so you could see it again for the first time. I don't say that about a lot of movies, but this is definitely one of them.
you mentioned the friend saying like if Wolverine doesn't kill anyone like the first 10 minutes, I'm out of here. Have I met this friend?
Probably. I'll tell you off air, but yeah, I
Yeah,
want to say
tell
so.
t tell me off air. Phil is one of my best friends, so he's like I've known him for like I would say years, but I think it's been a decade plus, which is just
I
insane.
think we're pushing. I was thinking about this the other day. I think we're pushing a decade plus for sure. So it's been a good time, and I look forward to the next decade, my friend.
And many more after that. But Phil's got a YouTube channel. It's linked in the description. What do you got coming up?
Well, like most, and Jake's thrown plenty of jokes at me this past 10 days or so, but like most people in the world, all my productivity is stopped because I've been playing college football 25. I'm finally, as you can see, back in the real world again. So I'm going to do a kind of a long-term review of the game with my friend Nick Rice. We're going to just play a game and podcast over it while we talk about the game. So that's probably the next scene that's coming out next week. And then college football is about 40 or so days away. More on that. So back to regular podcast viewing. Me and Jake have a few movie reviews in the sports sector that we're going to do over on my channel. I have a few others coming after that. So we have, I think the first one me and Jake are going to do is Heels is dropping on Netflix. So we're going to give that a rewatch, and then we're going to review seasons 1 and 2 of Heels, originally airing on Stars, and now it's to the general public again. So I look forward to that. So if you want to see more content like this, more geared towards sports movies, check it out, and we hope to see you there.
Yeah, definitely give him a subscribe. I'm looking forward to reviewing Heels with Phil. It's like it's wrestling and it's a TV show. Not only that, but it's a really good TV show. And Netflix has stated that they are putting the show on Netflix with the intention of possibly making a third season. God, I hope that that
Yeah,
happens. But
because I've watched the first season as it came out, but by the time I tried to get to the second season, it was already yanked off Stars. So I'm looking forward to seeing the second part of it, and then hopefully we're on here reviewing it saying they got to have a third season because that was awesome. So we'll see. Fingers crossed, like you said.
The whole thing, like, we could, I mean, we'll save it for when we talk about Heels, when we
Sure,
start
yeah.
talking about it, but it being on Stars is just weird. But let's save that for when we talk about Heels. As far as this channel goes, if you like this video, leave a like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications and all of that. The road to Deadpool and Wolverine is almost over, but I still have a couple of more movies left. And I'm going to have Jake from 3D Movie Cinema back on the channel to talk about Deadpool 2. So look forward to that. But for Phil, my name is Ryan Cam. We will see you all in the next one. Y'all take care.